Hello, hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome to this video. Reading slumps. We all get into them, we hate them, they suck to get out of, but today I have some book recommendations for you for books that will help you get out of a reading slump. I can't guarantee anything, so don't sue me if you read one of these and it actually ends up putting you in another slump. I don't know you, I don't know your tastes, but I feel like I have a really good mix of a lot of different things here that could potentially help you get out of a slump. I've broken things up into different categories, so based on whatever mood you're in, I feel like there's something for you here to help you get out of that reading slump, whether it's been a couple of weeks, a couple months, or even a couple of years. But before we get any further into this video, I quickly want to thank today's sponsor, which is glassesusa.com. I am currently wearing a pair of frames that I got from them that I really love. Glassesusa.com is an online glasses retailer that offers both prescription eyeglasses and sunglasses for up to 70% off of the retail price. So they are very affordable and a great place to pick up your next pair of glasses. They have a huge frame selection of over 9,000 frames for both eyeglasses and sunglasses, which includes a ton of designer brands. So this is one of the frames that I chose personally, which I'm super into. It has like this little tortoise shell design around it, and I think they're really cute because I love the color of them. And then I also got these gold kind of like cat eye frames, which I really like as well. I think they really suit my face. And both of these are actually blue light blocking glasses. So I don't actually have prescription glasses, like I don't need prescription lenses, but I love wearing blue light lenses while I'm working because I'm constantly looking at a screen, and these lenses block up to 95% of harmful blue light rays. So yeah, they're super helpful, and wearing blue light lenses definitely helps me while I'm working, and it helps me reduce headaches because I am super prone to headaches. But when I'm wearing these, it's so much nicer when I'm working. But I also got two pairs of sunglasses as well. So we have these kind of trendier glasses, which I'm super into. I think they're really cute. And these other glasses as well, which I really like. These are just very me, very my style, and they're tortoise shell as well, so I think they're really nice. The price point for both sunglasses and eyeglasses starts at $30, and you can add almost any type of prescription to either one as well. They have a risk-free shopping experience, which means free shipping and returns and 100% money-back guarantee. And they have high-quality lenses, so the quality of their lenses are the same that you'll find in any other glasses store. So if you are interested in checking out glassesusa.com for yourself, I will have links in the description box to both their website as well as all of the different frames that I'm wearing in this video if you're interested in any of these. But be sure to check out the links there if you're looking for your next pair of either eyeglasses or sunglasses. Again, a huge thank you to glassesusa.com for sponsoring this video, but now let's get into all of my book recommendations for how to get you out of a reading slump, because I know you're suffering, it's hard, it's a struggle, but we're gonna get through it, okay? We're gonna get you out of it. We're gonna get you out of it. Before we even get into the books though, my number one biggest recommendation for how to get out of a reading slump is to let yourself naturally get out of it. And what I mean by that is to just not force yourself to read if you don't feel like reading. I think the biggest thing I've learned over time with the amount of time I have been super into reading and the number of times I've been in and out of a reading slump, I think the biggest and most important lesson I have learned is that I have to let myself just not read sometimes, because you just cannot always be doing something. You will get tired of it, you will get burned out, you will get uninterested for a little while, and sometimes you have to just take a few steps away and then let yourself come back to it naturally. So that's my number one biggest tip. But if you've done that for some time now and you feel that like inkling of maybe I kind of want to start reading again, but I don't even know what I want to do, I've just been in a slump for so long and like I don't know how to get myself out of it right now, then this video is for you. These recommendations are for you to kind of like dip your toe back into reading if you've stepped away from it for a little while. So I've broken this list up into 6 different categories, and I have 2 book recommendations in each category. So starting out with the first category, we have magical books, kind of urban fantasy, a little bit of magical realism, something along those lines. So the first book I have to recommend in this category is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I read this book this year for the first time, and I've recommended it a couple of times on my channel now, but I think this is a perfect book to help get you out of a reading slump. This book is one of those books that kind of like reminds you why you love to read so much. It's a perfect, heartwarming, found family fantasy story, and it is so well-rounded, well-written, compelling, character-driven, but also somewhat plot-driven, and it will just leave you feeling so warm and happy inside. It takes place in a world where people can be born as like monsters or magical creatures, and we follow around our main character, who is basically like a social worker, and he's assigned to go to this orphanage where some children who were born as magical creatures that are deemed especially dangerous are living. and he has to go like investigate their case essentially. That's all I think you should really know about it before you go into it. But yeah, it's just such a wonderful story. It is something that definitely helped me get out of my reading slump over the past year, and it's something that I definitely think a lot of people will enjoy. It's a very popular book. Many people have read it, but I think that if you're trying to get out of a reading slump, this is a really good book to pick up and try out. The next book that I have to recommend in this magical category is The Weight of Feathers by Anna Marie McLemore. I read this book years ago, and it is one of my favorite YA contemporaries, and I think it's deeply underrated. It's a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet retelling. I hesitate saying retelling. It's not a full retelling. It's just kind of like a reimagining of that story, or it takes tropes from that story, because it follows the story of these two rival families who are both like traveling performers, but they're each other's competition. So, you know, like the two main characters fall in love with each other, but they're from these like competing families, hence the Romeo and Juliet inspiration. But this is a magical realism book, and I think it is so beautifully written. It's really not very long at all. I think it's only about 300 pages or something. Yeah, it's 308 pages, so definitely on the shorter side and something that you will be able to fly through. You kind of have to suspend some of your disbelief while you're reading this because it is magical realism. It's not meant to make full sense all the time. The writing is really lyrical. It's really beautiful. It's a wonderful story. It's another book that I feel like just reminds me of why I like to read, and it's something that you can get through fairly quickly as well. I've only read one other Anna Marie McLemore book, and I enjoyed that one as well, but this is definitely my favorite of the ones I've read, and I want to check out their other books too, especially When the Moon Was Ours. But of the ones I've read, this is the one I definitely recommend, but if you're interested in checking out their other books, I'd highly recommend that as well because the writing in here is great. All right, so my next category is a category that I feel like I could make an entire video about once I read some more books in this genre, category, whatever you want to call it, but that is books about books. I always find that reading books about books helps me get out of a reading slump because, again, it reminds me of why I like to read, and then it just makes me want to read more. And the first book I have to recommend in that category, I feel like neither of these are going to be surprises, but the first one is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I recommended this book countless times because it is one of my all-time favorite books. It's so good. Please read it. It's a historical fiction book set in the 1940s in Spain, and we follow around our main character who finds this book in a library, and he finds out that this is like the only copy of this book, and he can't seem to find any other books by this author until he learns that all of this author's books have been burned and he doesn't know why. And then he spends years trying to figure out what happened to him and what his whole story is, and it's just so good. It's actually a series. I still have yet to read the other books in the series, but I desperately need to. This is definitely a book that's on the longer side. It's a little bit over 500 pages, so yes, lengthier. I usually just recommend books that are pretty short when you're trying to get out of a reading slump, but this book is so captivating that like you just need to keep reading, and I think that's another really important key thing to look for in a book when you're trying to get out of a reading slump. You want something that's going to grab and hold your attention and never let it go. That's what this book is. It's so good. I know plenty of people have read it. I know plenty of people have recommended it, but another tip that I have is sometimes you gotta reread a book to get yourself out of a reading slump. So if you've read like literally every single book I recommend in this video, I highly recommend a reread because sometimes that will also help you. But if you haven't, read this. It'll remind you why you like to read. If you like books about books, if you've never read books about books, you definitely should start. And this is a great place to start. All right, and then of course, I created this entire category and decided to finally film this entire video because I just finished reading this book that I'm about to mention, which is now probably my new all-time favorite book. And that is, of course, none other than The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. If you missed it, I just recently uploaded a video of myself reading this book and vlogging my whole experience so you could see all of my reactions to it. It's pretty much a spoiler-free video, so I'll leave it linked on the screen if you want to watch my reaction to reading The Starless Sea, because oh my god, this book like changed everything for me. I was in the worst reading slump that I'd been in for years, like years and years. And this book was what finally completely pulled me out of it. After I finished this, I've literally already read 3 books. Like the day after I read this, I started reading everything else immediately, and I finished 3 books in 4 days. Like I haven't done that in so long. I used to be able to read a book a day, and then I fell out of that completely for like well over a year. And now I'm back to it because, oh my God, this book just changed it for me. I really don't think you should know anything about The Starless Sea before you read it. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing, and I really think that's the best way to go into it. I said this in my video review of it as well, but I don't think this is a book for everybody. I really don't. Because of the writing and because of how confusing it can be, it's definitely on the more confusing side because it's not meant to make sense, and that's kind of the point. But if you are willing to let yourself be confused, if you are willing to let yourself get lost in a story completely, get lost in fantasy and magic and just the power of storytelling, because that's pretty much what this book is entirely about, then I think you will love this, and I think it will, again, remind you of why you like to read and finally start to pull you out of your reading slump. I had multiple people tell me that this book had like the same effect on them, where they were in a reading slump and this book really just like pulled them out of it because, oh my God, if you end up liking this, if this ends up being your type of thing, I promise you it will get you out of a reading slump. It might put you in one too because it's just so good and you're just gonna wanna read it over and over again, but still, I think it will pull you out of a reading slump too. The only thing I'll really tell you about it is that this book is, I don't want to say a book about books. I prefer to call it a story about stories because I feel like that's more accurate to what it actually is. But the general story just follows around our main character, who is a graduate student, and he finds this book in a library that has like parts of his life written in it, and so he's like fascinated by it, and then he wants to find out more, and so he does. And I think that's all you should know. I don't think you should know anything else. Just read it. Read The Starless Sea. Oh my God, it is so good. It literally pretty much topped The Night Circus for me. I don't know how to talk about this book. It's so good. Read it. It will get you out of a reading slump. All right, the next category that I have are books that are written in a unique format. And also I feel like this category can double for audiobooks you should listen to, because I think that these are perfect audiobooks, and audiobooks always definitely help me get out of a reading slump too. But these books both have a very unique format that's very different from a lot of other books, and the audiobooks for them are exceptional, and you should definitely listen to them. The first one is another one of my all-time favorite books, and that is of course none other than Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book might also put you in a reading slump. I feel like I said before, so many of these can double for both. It'll get you out of one, but it might put you back into one just because they're so good. But everyone has talked about Daisy Jones. I've talked about this book for years now. Ever since it came out, I have been obsessed with it, and I remain obsessed with it because it's so incredible. But if by some chance you have not yet read Daisy Jones and the Six, it follows the story of this fictional band and their story of how they got together, how they broke up, and everything in between their relationships with one another, but it's all told in the format of an interview. So if you can see inside the book, it has like the character's name who is speaking and then what they said in their interview, and then like the next character's name and like what they said in their interview. So it's literally just like reading an interview essentially. But I highly recommend the audiobook for this one. I've read it both physically and listened to the audiobook, and honestly I think listening to the audiobook is even more fun because it has a full cast playing each different character, and it's so immersive and just so great to listen to. So yeah, definitely think this is a book that can get you out of a reading slump just because it's so different. It's honestly really quick to get through. It's about 350 pages, so on the slightly longer end of what I would call like a shorter book, but again, with the audiobook you'll fly through it. It's basically essentially all dialogue. It's just so much faster to read. But yeah, again, one of my all-time favorite books. Highly recommend if you have still not yet read it. Again, I know it's really popular, but maybe it's time for a reread. Who knows? That could help you. It could really help you. I just want everyone to read Daisy Jones and the Six because I've been screaming about it for years, and I'll continue to scream about it because it's so good. The next book that I have in this category is, of course, Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is a book that is essentially told in the form of a podcast. And again, listen to the audiobook because it essentially just feels like listening to a true crime podcast, because that's pretty much what the book is. Again, it's another book I think you should know pretty much nothing about, other than the story is about this girl named Sadie who goes missing, and then we have like this radio show pretty much that's kind of like trying to uncover her story and figure out what happened to this girl. And that's all you should know. Again, please listen to the audiobook. It's such a fun experience. I mean, it's a really sad book, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's just such an enjoyable reading experience because it really just feels like a podcast, but it's in novel form, which is so cool and so fun and so unique to anything else I've ever seen. It's another one that is, again, pretty short. It's about 300 pages, maybe just a little bit over that, but not much at all. So you'll fly right through it, and it's a very easy read as well. Again, definitely like darker in terms of the subject matter, but easy to get through because of how compelling and readable it is. So for the next category, I have some poetry books / books that are written in verse. I think poetry is really helpful for helping you get out of a reading slump because they're pretty short for the most part, and sometimes just finishing a book motivates you to keep keep reading, and I've definitely found that when I'm in a reading slump sometimes, reading a poetry book, reading something really short, just because I finished it, I feel more motivated to continue to read some more. So that's why I would recommend a couple poetry books, and the first one is one of my favorites, which is No Matter the Wreckage by Sarah Kay. Sarah Kay is one of my favorite poets. If you were online on Tumblr in like 2013, circa 2013, 2012-ish, you would know that Sarah Kay had like Tumblr and like that whole like hipster community like by the throat. Her poem B is still one of my favorite poems of all time. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please look it up. It's just a spoken word poem. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's so good and I think about it all the time. But she released a poetry collection a few years ago and I read it and I really, really loved this as well. So I'd highly recommend reading this. I think it's wonderful. It's really easy to get through. The poems in here are beautiful and you'll be able to finish it really quickly, and hopefully that can help you get out of your slump a bit. My other poetry recommendation is actually a novel that is written in verse. I've recommended this several times as well, but it's just because I think it's so good and it is so easy to read. Again, the subject matter in this one is a little bit difficult from time to time, but it's just really, really readable, and because it's written in verse, you get through it so fast. And that is none other than The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I love the writing in here. It is so good. The story itself is so good. It's something that makes you want to keep reading. You don't really want to put this book down. You just want to finish it in one go. It's not very long. It looks so much longer than it actually is, because if you even like look at some of the pages, you will notice like it's short, you know, like because it's written in verse, it's poetry. It's about 360 pages, but it's actually much shorter than that if you were to condense it all down, because there are some pages with just like a few lines written on them. But it's also just an incredible story with just lavish writing. So well done. Elizabeth Acevedo has a way with words because she is a poet, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. It's a book written in verse about a girl who loves spoken word poetry. So I find that really unique as well, and it's just one of my favorite YA contemporaries too, and I highly recommend it if you still haven't picked it up. All right, so my next category is graphic novels, because just like poetry, these are so easy to read, they are so easy to finish, and once you finish something, you feel like you have the motivation to keep going. So I highly recommend trying out graphic novels or manga or comics or anything when you're trying to get out of a reading slump, but these are two of my recommendations. The first one I have here can kind of double as a poetry book. I don't exactly know what to call it sometimes, but I feel like graphic novel slash illustrated poetry book is the most appropriate thing to call it, but I'm just putting it in my graphic novel section. But that is Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Johnny Sun. This book is mostly just kind of like an existential little book of motivational quotes that are very like heartwarming, really simplistic, but for some reason really, really emotionally impactful. Again, I call it like a graphic novel because it has like the illustrations and stuff in it with the text, and it's pretty much like a graphic little storybook. So I don't know what else you would really call it. You can call it poetry, you can call it whatever you want, but I definitely think it's something that you should read if you're trying to get out of a reading slump. It's another one of those things where I read this and I was like, this is why I love reading, because I love the power of writing. I love the power of words, regardless of how simple or even misspelled they are, which is intentional obviously in here. It can really hit you in a way that you're not expecting sometimes. And that's one of my favorite things about reading. And it's another book that just reminded me of why I like writing and why I like reading so much. I also read this at a time when I think I was in a pretty bad reading slump, and I think this helped pull me out a little bit too, just because it was so easy to get through, and I think about it still from time to time. Even though I read it years ago, I'll remember like little lines and things from in here, or just revisit it every once in a while because it meant that much to me. And I just think it's a really nice read, really simplistic. If you're not trying to get into something that requires you to think a lot, you know, this book will kind of just like think for you and comfort you and reassure you, which I think can be really helpful when you're stuck in that reading slump space. And the last graphic novel I have to recommend is definitely one of my favorites, and that is The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. The Prince and the Dressmaker is so cute. I literally walked into Barnes & Noble one day. I'd heard a few things about this book before, but I walked into the graphic novel section, I picked up the book, I was like, I just want to try reading it. I sat there, I was trying to just kill some time because I was waiting for something, and I sat there, I started reading it, and then like 30 minutes had gone by and I'd literally finished the entire thing without even realizing it. And so then I immediately just went up and bought it because I was like, I need this. This was so cute. I loved it so much. It was such a good story. It's definitely on the longer side. I did read it in like half an hour, maybe 45 minutes or something like that, just because I was so engrossed in the story. But I think that's one of the reasons that I pick it as like one of the graphic novel recommendations I have to help you get out of a slump, because you don't want to put this down. Like you want to finish the story all at once, which I think is super important when you're trying to get out of that like slump space. I always, whenever I'm in a reading slump, will start a book and then just like put it down after like a few pages or maybe a few chapters. And if it doesn't hold my attention from like the first page, I get bored. So I need something that is attention grabbing instantly, and I think this one definitely is from beginning to end. It's super cute. The art is so well done. It's literally just about this prince who loves to wear dresses, and he meets this girl who makes dresses for him. She's a dressmaker, and their story is adorable and heartwarming and beautiful, and I don't know how else to describe it. It's just such a good graphic novel. I highly recommend you check it out. All right, and then the very last category that I have is nonfiction books. And the first one that I have in this category is actually another graphic novel, so I could have put it in the graphic novel section, but I wanted to include this in nonfiction, and that is Persepolis. So there are 2 volumes to this, or there's like a bind-up volume, but this is just volume 1. Persepolis is a graphic memoir about Marjane Satrapi's life as she was growing up in Iran during the Iranian Revolution. And there's actually a film for it out as well, like an animated film, which I still have yet to see. I really need to. I've been saying it for years because I love this graphic novel. It's genuinely very funny. It's heartbreaking, it's sad, but also hopeful at times, and just a beautiful way of sharing one's life and one's experience through like a graphic memoir. I just find that really fascinating and something I don't feel like we see that often, but I would like to see more of. It's very easy to read, really easy to follow. It's not confusing whatsoever, and something that you'll get through really fast. It's also very short, so like it will take you no time at all to read this. The art is pretty simplistic and it's black and white, but it's also just really well done, and like I said, it's also still funny. Like, it's not just all sad, which I sometimes really need when I'm trying to get out of a slump. Like, I just want something lighthearted or something that can make me laugh, and while the subject matter of this is definitely not lighthearted, the tone that she has towards some of it and the approach that she has, some of the jokes that she makes in here definitely make it a lot more fun to read, and it's not just all sad, you know, which I find really nice and really refreshing. Highly recommend checking this one out if you're looking for some new nonfiction to read. If you're looking for something that's a little bit just like outside of your comfort zone, if you're too tired of something you've read a lot of, try picking up something new, and this might be that thing. And then the last nonfiction book that I have, and the last book I have to recommend in this video for books to help you get out of a reading slump, is none other than In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I have talked about this book so many times over the last year because it is just so good. This is probably the best nonfiction book I have ever read, and I don't know if I can read a nonfiction book that I will like more. The subject matter of this one is very sad. Sometimes it is kind of hard to get through, but because this book is so well written and it is so unlike anything else you will read and unlike any other nonfiction book that you've probably read, I definitely wanted to include it on this list because I just think that it is something that, for me at least, definitely reminded me of why I like reading, why I like storytelling, and it made me want to continue reading. It looks a little bit like on the thicker side, but it's under 300 pages. Some of the pages really have like almost no writing on them at all. It's just a few lines. The only thing that I feel like might be a slight hindrance is just how difficult it can be to read sometimes because of the subject matter and the fact that it's a lot darker and just really emotionally heavy. So that's the only thing I would say for sure. But apart from that, if that is something that you're actually looking for, because sometimes I know when I'm in a reading slump, I just want something like emotional because everything feels like it's lacking, and I just want something that's actually going to make me feel. This book will make you feel. Like, I promise it's going to make you feel something. This book is another memoir, and it's about Carmen Maria Machado's life in this emotionally abusive relationship that she was in and how it affected her life and her future relationships and her view of herself and so much more. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. And I've recommended it countless times, but I'm going to keep doing so because her writing is so good. So if you're looking for really good writing to help you get out of a slump too, this is like one of my top tier recommendations because the writing is just exceptional. But there you have it. That is it for all of my recommendations of books to help you get out of a reading slump. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that you can find at least one book on this list of like, what, 12 books that I had to help you get out of your reading slump. Maybe even just one of them caught your eye, caught your attention. But again, like I said, my biggest tip is always just to let yourself come back to reading naturally. Do not force it. Don't force yourself to read. Let yourself come back to it when you actually want to come back to it. And when you do, try picking up one of these books because I feel like at least one thing on this list will motivate you to keep reading. Once again, don't forget to check out glassesusa.com in the description box below. I have all of the links listed there. But if you have read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, if you're interested in checking any of them out, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Or if there are any other recommendation videos that you are in desperate need of, definitely let me know go as well, and I will try to come up with my best recommendations for you in another video. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I am at @clockwork_reads. All the links are in the description box as always. But thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!